Very glad that you're able to join us today for this workshop. So a few notes as we gather. The plan is to create a little bit of a community where it's easier for us to respect and honor each other, making it easier for all of us to share our gifts and our wisdom. And so part of that is establishing some specific norms or guidelines. So to help make everything safer and easier and generally happier, we'd like to establish the following norms. First of all, usual Zoom etiquette. When you're not speaking, please keep your microphone muted. When you are speaking, encourage you to take your time, be as clear as possible to make it easier for others to hear you. Rather than responding immediately to our speaker, we invite you to share your questions or your comments in the chat where everyone can read them, and the facilitator and moderator can refer to them as we go. And there'll be a couple of breakout sessions as well for a more in-depth conversation. We welcome everyone to participate to your level of comfort. This session is being recorded, and you're invited to share your video if you're willing to do that. And of course, please respect one another. Disagreement is a natural part of human conversation, but disrespect is unwelcome. As moderator, I'll step in if necessary, and I please do encourage you to send me a private message if anything happens that you want to draw to my attention. I'm going to copy and paste these norms into the chat so that we have them to refer to. So it's my pleasure, it's my real pleasure to introduce Reverend Miriam Spies, an ordained minister in the United Church of Canada. Miriam is currently in PhD studies at Emmanuel College in Toronto School of Theology, where she's examining the place of and imagination for the leadership of people with disabilities in the church. Miriam is co-editor of the Canadian Journal of Theology, Mental Health and Disability. She lives with cerebral palsy. Speaking for myself, I'm deeply grateful that Reverend Miriam is sharing with us. I've known her for the past several years and always appreciate the wisdom of her voice. As you'll see in the chat, Miriam's provided a full text, almost full text of what she'll be saying in a Google document for you to follow along, which is also a great reference for us in the future. And there's also a closed captioning link that I'll share. So there's just like a lot of follow along reading options for you. So with that said, I will turn this over with gratitude.
Thank you, Peter. It's wonderful to be with all of you today and see some familiar faces and meet some new ones. The Google Doc might be hard if you only have so much screen space, but it can be used to go back to afterwards. So if you could share the PowerPoint, and we'll turn now to a word of prayer. Loving Creator, we gather here from different places. Some on the land of the Haudenosaunee, Mississaugas at the New Cottage, some scattered on other lands. But we all gather to listen and learn from each other. And from the words of your prophet to us today, as we dive to be churches and societies where marginalized bodies matter. Be with us now as we follow Jesus, the incarnated Lord, who imagines your kingdom on earth. Amen. In many ways, the current pandemic has exposed inequities that have been in our society. The question for us is, how do we not return to normal, but use this time to reimagine alternatives? An alternative vision, a kingdom vision in which Black bodies matter, Indigenous bodies matter, disabled bodies matter, and on consciousness. We will spend our time going through theme movements found in our biblical prophets, connecting their words to our learning today, and not naming disabled people as prophets, but rather the prophets continue to expose truth and disturb the current way of life, call for lament and relinquishment of what has been, and imagine an alternative vision where we live in right relationship with God and God's people, especially those deemed disposable by the world. We'll consider each movement with a reflection and a conversation. But before we get started further, let's introduce ourselves. We don't have time for long intros, but to get a sense of who's in the room, please type in the chat where you are and a sentence about what you hear today. If it's easier to speak, you can open up your participant list to raise your hand. So just give a few moments for us to greet one another. It's wonderful to be in a group of so many leaders engaged in this work already. Thank you all for being here. Some have disabilities and some have loved ones with disabilities. So I'm sure they could be leading this workshop just as much as I am. Here are these words from Jeremiah. Yet they did not obey or incline their ear, but everyone walked in the stubbornness of an evil will. Pretty harsh words for Saturday morning. This was the prophet Jeremiah. Exposed that the people had violated the Torah requirements, breaking the covenantal relationship with God. Since February, March, the pandemic has exposed what many had been telling the board. The growing disparities of and the unsustainability of the current ways. Black and brown communities have been bearing the brunt of the disease. Mona Bio of Hamilton Communities Legal Clinic said, with poverty and language barriers and other socioeconomic conditions play a very important role that people cope, deal, or fight against COVID-19. And so now it's up to officials to put that into action. Elders and disabled members of our community have been portrayed by the media as having underlying health conditions. And that's not as shocking that they have been victims. This was especially the case in the early days of the pandemic. Policy decisions among long-term care homes for elders and disabled members have placed people at higher risk. In our first case study, digest this exposure from Maya Goldenberg, a prof at University of Guelph. She argues that long-term care is having a much needed reckoning in Canada after decades of policy neglect. We'll go ahead and break up one, but we won't have time to solve this entirely. But I want you to share on this question after you put the quote. What truth about attitudes in society has COVID exposed? Have you experienced a shift in the discourse? And what is the role of the church in disrupting the stubbornness of the status quo. Again, we won't have a long time, but take 10 minutes and Peter will send you off into workout. Oh,
I'm going to read then. The rates of COVID-19 deaths among elderly residents in these facilities are staggering, far outpacing any other vulnerable population disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. The staff are also getting sick, creating further staffing shortages in already understaffed facilities. The COVID-19 stress test has highlighted the precariousness of the informal triangulation of care model operating in Canadian long-term care facilities. Facilities use bare bones staffing numbers and leave it to the families to contribute to resident care themselves or through the private contracting of healthcare aides. When COVID-19 physical distancing measures necessitated family and in some facilities healthcare aides to stay away, the staff were unable to manage the demands of care. Long-term care staff tend to work part-time in multiple facilities as a way for institutions to avoid the added cost of providing benefits like sick pay to full-time staff. This led to infected staff spreading the virus from one institution to another. Shortages of personal protective equipment added even more stress on this underpaid and undervalued pink-collar labor force, mostly racialized immigrant and migrant women, who do not have clout like the Canadian Armed Forces to draw public and political attention to this care crisis. Maya J. Goldenberg, Associate Professor in the Department of Philosophy at the University of Guelph. So I'm going to set up the breakout rooms now, where you can discuss these questions. Okay, is there anyone still in this space that didn't get a link that would like one? I think I can manually put you in rooms.
he told Peter, do you? Okay.
Oh. I realized now I didn't put it for 13 minutes. It was just at 10 minutes. So
Great.
these will end a little early.
That's awesome because I think I over. What time are we ending? Noon.
I think
right?
noon. Yeah.
Okay. I haven't done a workshop in ages, so I forget how long things take.
Right. Yeah, me too. I have to say, it's been a long time. All right. That's an amazing quote from, yeah. So, it's a real, gets you like, it's one thing after another. It's like,
yeah. Oh. Hi, Keith.
Hi, was there an issue with the breakout room?
You're on mute.
We can't hear you, Keith. Not sure if you can hear us.
You missed the instructions as to what was to happen with the breakout rooms.
Sorry, Keith. Sorry. You were on mute there until just a few seconds ago, so I missed what you were saying.
You muted me, I guess, eh?
I did. Apparently I can do that. I didn't know.
Power. Anyway, all I said was nothing was happening in the breakout room. That we sat and looked at each other, I guess. And secondly, I may have missed, I joined the whole session late.
Oh, okay.
Missed the instructions about the breakout rooms and their purpose.
Yes. So, well, perhaps this is a message I need to send to everybody then, rather than just you. So
and
yeah, there was a set of questions, and then there was the quote. So perhaps I'll just.
I came in as the talk was happening. Then you read the golden the statement, and then we went to breakout rooms. And so I apologize for being late, but
yeah, it very much.
Was each breakout room sort of chaired by somebody, or was it left to the people to just launch into discussion? So anyway.
Left to the people.
Yeah. I'm sending.
Those were the questions. Okay.
I
saw the question. But...
Thank you, Peter.
You're welcome. I have learned in my church we use Zoom. Oh dear. Okay, do one thing at a time here, Snape. I don't know if this is going to work. I've learned in my church that you can't put people in groups and expect them to to discuss any particular topic, because they just like to visit.
Yeah,
that can happen too, yeah.
but I wanted people to have a chance to engage.
Yeah, and it's, Keith, as I was reading that quote, even reading it aloud, I was seeing all these connections between these different pieces, the understaffing and the underfunding, and the giving people precarious work conditions, so they have to have multiple jobs at different facilities. It's pretty grim.
It is, yes, for sure.
Yeah, so what do you think might be the church's role in advocacy around long-term care?
There was an interesting question that came up in the plenary where somebody asked the bishop, what did he think about clergy not being essential workers, or were they essential workers?
Right.
And I think in that case, it was about providing pastoral care to residents, presumably, right, or people in hospital, I guess. But, now this question is making me think about clergy or church visitors as advocates as well.
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting. And, I've heard this about engaging the medical model, is it can be very helpful to have an advocate with you or somebody with you just to help you navigate that.
Yeah.
This is kind of interesting. I'd never quite thought about that.
The role of advocacy.
Yeah.
Parish nurses have, in my experience, been very helpful as advocates, as a kind of a bridging ministry between the medical and the pastoral. Not so much in COVID times, it was pre-COVID times, but and more in hospitals than in long-term care facilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's your time, Peter?
We have another about 3 minutes.
Okay.
The other thing about breakout rooms is sometimes you only have, one person in a breakout room. It hasn't happened this time. I have a list of them and who's in each one.
Yeah.
But some groups have 5 people, some groups have 2.
Yeah.
And then I guess if there's nobody there in a breakout room to sort of take the initiative to start or whatever, what was happening in my brief experience there was just nobody was saying anything. So,
right.
So.
Well, hopefully our second breakout room will
Yeah.
And that was my first
be
experience. I'm not a
easier.
huge Zoom. I don't use a lot of Zoom, so for whatever reason, not because. Anyway, it's just the reality. And so my first experience of the breakout room. So I won't be rushing into them.
It will get.
We don't use them in my parish, for instance.
It'll get simpler, and
Yeah.
I think even once people see each other for a few minutes and think, oh, we should be doing something, they'll start to
Yeah.
engage.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. We can get bored listening to me for an hour.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, hopefully people get what they need.
Yeah, that's right.
From the time.
I guess I was prompted at one point by a fellow pastor. He's now retired. For a period of his life, he had to be in a wheelchair. And he said to me, the way people treated him when he was in a wheelchair in contrast to now was quite profound. And that's always stuck with me.
Yeah,
People didn't even see him. Am I still connected?
Yeah.
Yep.
I've lost the picture and everything. Zoom phone is expanding your reach. Streamline global calling in 40 plus countries and territories.
Oh, well, we can still hear you. Can you still hear us?
I can hear you, but I can't see you.
If you
Oh, there we are. It popped up another. Well, that's bizarre.
Ghosts in the machine.
There we go. So now what's happening? The breakout rooms are going to finish in a moment, and then you're coming back to the large group?
That's right. Yeah.
And then we'll go into a bit of a reflection by me.
Yeah, great. Do you want? I think you said to have people put things in the chat.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Okay, so now it's in its automatic 60-second close, so people will start to reappear in a few seconds. And I will screen share again. Maybe I'll wait for people to start coming back in.
Wait till they come back.
Great. Keith, thanks
Miriam,
for keeping us company.
you've got a lot of fancy books behind you there.
I know, I wish.
Mine are real behind me.
Yeah, I'm very jealous.
Yeah.
I don't have time to show it, but I have a virtual background, which is just a plate full of different types of avocados.
Oh, I see.
Right.
Make a person hungry.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back, folks.
Welcome back. I imagine some groups. I hope all of you had a good time together. Maybe it wasn't enough time or too much time, or maybe you spent the time getting to know each other, which is all good too. But as we come back, if you would write one key learning or reflection in the chat box for others to see what you talk about, that would be great. The role of advocacy in care facilities. Perhaps the discourse will not change until they're prioritized. And all kinds of health is connected, and the health of those in the care homes and the health of the workers. Provide leadership of people. Those sound like really good conversations. Thank you for engaging briefly that. Our second movement today will be focusing on lament. And the prophet knew the significance of lament, their own as well as God's part. They expose failures and lament consequences. And much the sons at the temple shall become wearing in that day. In between the exposure of truth and the reimagination of relationship, there is space for lament, lamenting what was and lamenting the future one had envisioned. Near the beginning of a pandemic days, I wrote a piece suggesting time was shifting because of our changed routines and priorities. As a disabled woman, I'm familiar with quick time. Knowing things take longer for me to do than able-bodied people. As Christians, we have a profound calling to live in God's time, dancing to a different rhythm. Though sometimes we judge ourselves with capitalist terms, focusing on how much we are able to accomplish. Living in COVID has made us out to relinquish, in some ways, the value of time. But there is grief in that too. Who are we if we aren't measured by productivity? Like people who become disabled later in life, or people who are aging, or people who have lost work in this crisis. We lament and relinquish what we have known. I don't know about churches in the Anglican communion, but churches in my denomination pride ourselves in how much we can do. And so this time change, shifting from doing to being, has brought up questions regarding our identity, mission, and values. In our second case study, notice the questions that COVID has exposed, but may have already been there. Consider how can we create places of lament in time of these changes? How has time shifted for us in our churches? And what new or old values could be emerging? Big questions, but we won't cover all of them, but something to get us thinking. And Peter, if you could read.
Great. Case study, a busy church. A busy church has prided itself on living up to its name, from hosting yard sales and gardening in the summer, to 3 Sittingham dinners in the fall, to putting together Christmas musicals and Easter dramas in the winter and spring. Its people have been moving to this rhythm of traditions since before they can remember. Before COVID, volunteers were getting harder to find, and 82-year-old Mrs. Smith had been anticipating the hours of sorting and cleaning treasures for the huge annual yard sale. Suddenly, that was not going to happen. What would a busy church do? How might people with disabilities enter in more fully when there is a slower pace? What might they contribute to this time of lament and loss? What values could emerge? How might the use of a CRIP time lens assist the parish in COVID? I'm going to set up the...
Any questions before we move into breakout rooms again? Or is it clear as mud? Can you tell me what? Okay, quick time is how I was talking about time for people with disabilities. Usually things take longer for us to do. So it's like we almost live in a different time zone in the normal time zone too. So living in 2 time zones as one. Thank you for the question. Have a good conversation.
Okay. 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 So everyone should have an invite to join one of the rooms. If you don't have one and you want to join in one of the rooms, now's the time to say something and I think I can set you up. Vanessa. Okay, let me try this for you. Does anything come up for you, Vanessa? Well, if it doesn't come through, we can also have a conversation in here. You will not be abandoned. Yeah, so the the breakout rooms have some questions to discuss around the topics so far. So at this point, we're looking at lament. Let me see if I can copy paste some of the questions that we had.
Can you unmute yourself, Vanessa? Or do you feel more comfortable typing? Maybe Peter could unmute you. If that's okay.
Right. It doesn't seem to be working. It's possible there's a technical issue, but in any case, it's all good. This period will last 10 minutes or so.
The intent is to go to breakout room. So if you see on the bottom of your screen where it says chat, it should also say join breakout room.
Mm.
Did you see that, Vanessa? No? We can have a conversation in here too.
This is the best conversation to be in, I think.
Yeah.
So I am really intrigued by this. And I will say this morning, as I was waking up, it did occur to me, I was like, oh, I wonder how long Miriam has been awake today, getting ready for the same thing that I'm doing. So it's really interesting, you know, it's just really interesting. I really appreciate the framing of the crypt time. But I guess I'm not, I don't know, maybe you could just say something more about how you see that in the church, or perhaps even in your own experience.
Yeah, I think crypt time is very close to the liturgical time.
Huh.
In my mind, things happen when they need to happen. Things take as long as they need to take for different bodies in different ways. I see you typing, Vanessa. Yeah, I think with time, even though I've lived in quick time all my life, it was a new idea. The term was new for me. And so quick time as opposed to capitalist time. We'll judge on production and consumption rather than being in relationship. So
it makes me think of, well, two things. One is a bit more related than the other. My friend Carrie, one time, who I was working with at the time, she talked about sometimes, you know, all I get done in a day is I make some food for myself, and, you know, I read a chapter of a good book. And at the time I was a little horrified by this. And I felt like, yeah, like, honestly, this is my honest reaction that I'm not very proud of. I thought, oh, that's not very good. I sort of thought to myself, oh, like, surely you should be aiming for something more than that. and kind of even having that reaction myself was very helpful to think, oh, why do I think that? Honestly, what am I getting done in a day? I'm answering lots of emails. Is that actually contributing anything, or is it just feeling like I'm busy? So that example of the busy church, where we do so many things, and that's how we know that God loves us, or that's how we know who we are.
Yeah.
Very valuable. The other example that came to my mind was my friend Gladiola in Winnipeg, who I think would really resonate with this idea of crip time, who also really, uses a wheelchair and lives in a semi-accessible space. And
Semi-accessible.
Right. And she says, yeah, she says quite clearly, like, well, in COVID now everybody gets to know what I feel like.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's just an interesting revelation.
Yeah. No, COVID hasn't changed my life that much. Like I was living in Toronto and I moved home. So that was a big change. But day to day I'm still doing what I've been doing for years. So how about you, Vanessa? How have you been in this COVID time?
And do you want me to speak, or I don't want to interrupt your train of thought while you're giving the keynote?
No, we're just in this small group conversation, so please tell.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything you would like to share about how things have been for you in COVID, or any adaptations you've had to make?
Well, basically, I just want to say that I too was born with cerebral palsy, and I've never, and I hate the word disability. I find it very derogatory. I prefer the word challenges, because theologically that gives a much greater scope to the word as to those of us with challenges, how we can move within that scope of the challenges from one spectrum to the other, whether we're having challenges that day, or we're feeling a little bit better, or our level of engagement. Sorry, I don't want this to be a sermon.
No.
And like Miriam, I'm very vocal, so I will say I would love to discuss this further, and hope we have more opportunities to dialogue this, because in the paradigm shifts of theology, Jesus used those with challenges to bring the message to the kingdom of God, and we can do this now. It's just finding we need to engage our bishops and those in the church, and we need to have a constructive model of how we can move forward. So I'll mute myself and I'll just listen now.
No, thank you for saying that. The conversation around language is so fascinating because it changes. It always changes, and it changes depending on where you are and depending on who's around you and what you're reading. Growing up, I would never use the word quip. Like that word has so many connotations. But now I've been reading and really appreciating how people have reclaimed that word and are using it to say, no, we are disabled, and we have a role to play in society. So I think it's always changing.
And having studied theology myself at Wycliffe, we can use our voices, but we can also be those that educate.
For sure, like you are doing here and in your congregation. Yeah, for sure.
It's great, yeah.
I also find the language conversation, you know, I find it's so eye-opening for me as someone without this lived experience to hear people talk about why they use particular terms, or of course why they don't use other terms and things like that. I just really appreciate that.
And I'll just say what's impacted me for COVID is the isolation. And I'm extroverted, so I prefer to be in a group in real time. Zoom is new to me, but what I found for me is I was doing more pastoral work in the simple things of sending out little sachets of tea to my friends and say, hey, let's have a tea together in whatever time that means for you. And so I've been doing that for 6 months, and it's just my way of sharing in my way. So anyway, I'll just let our keynote speaker continue.
That's wonderful. I love that idea of sharing tea across time and space.
Yeah, that's lovely. I've written that down. I'm going to share that idea with my caring team at my church. I think that's a lovely concept. I will credit you. So we have the breakout rooms will be closing in a little under a minute, just so you know.
And we have about 20 minutes. Okay.
That should be good. You know, right at the beginning when I went to go and get myself a glass of water, I had the impulse to say, can I get anybody else anything? Isn't that funny?
I wish we were all together.
Yeah. Well, next year, maybe, God willing. But hopefully we can include more of these communication elements going forward to make it easier for everyone to participate.
For sure. Yeah, I might ask you to read a few highlights from people as they report in.
So highlights from the breakout rooms?
From the breakout.
Love to.
Okay.
Welcome back, folks. Just hold on for a minute or so as people continue to return. Welcome back, everybody, or most people. Some of the rooms are still open, so we'll just hold here. I must say, I think we've had the best conversation among those of us who didn't get put into breakout rooms, but I look forward to being proven wrong. So as before, if you want to put any highlights or learnings or insights into the chat, that would be great. Okay, welcome back, everyone. So as you're returning, I invite you to put any highlights or insights into the chat as before, whether you looked at this question of lament, of crypt time, or however the conversation took you. Oh, here they come. Here comes the answers. We had a great discussion about loneliness and about issues in long-term care. Use of technology has been a wonderful benefit for many, a barrier for those who do not have it. We need to find ways to support all. Yeah, I was just saying, you know, maybe next year, if, you know, when this conference takes place, you know, we don't know what form it will take, but we can hope it will take a form where more people are able to engage, whether that's in person or online or whatever else we can imagine. The value of giving oneself grace and the need for cooperation and unapologetically asking for help. 4 of us from different churches. The main discussion was around maintaining connection with those during this time of isolation, use of technology, hard copy dissemination of prayers, church services, continued use of telephone conversations. We had an amazing idea in our group. Vanessa shared about sending packets of tea to people and saying we can have a cup of tea together in what was the phrase, in time, perhaps across time,
in real time.
In real time, right? Yeah, that was genius. Those with lived experience know their needs and can bring ideas and voices to the table. The convenience of Zoom meeting available for everyone, including those inaccessible to attend church. Opportunities to work from home, enabling more inclusion for more to be involved in the workplace. Accessibility of church services and activities in the worship communities in ways that couldn't be done previously or weren't done previously. Listening and learning without assuming that everyone have these same opportunities. Continuing to reflect on the benefits of being less busy, amen, and reflecting more on our deeper relationship with God, less on fundraising. Did Jesus really want us to do? Yeah. We've been having coffee hour via Zoom. Sending something to be shared is a great idea. An interesting discussion on how the pandemic has allowed us contemplation and slowing down to see the world around us. Traveling together, taking walks, reaching out to those we haven't spoken to in years. Wow.
Those all sound like very rich conversations. Thank you. And I hope ideas continue forming even after we leave here. Because we're not in quick time now, but in workshop time, I will move on to movement C, where prophets help us to imagine an alternative. Isaiah spoke a message of hope from God. I'm about to create Jerusalem as a joy and its people as a delight. I will rejoice in Jerusalem and delight in my people. This vision, this alternative vision, brings the people back into right relationship with God. In this recent time, the prophets have moved from exposing truth to lamenting realities to reimagining God's coming kingdom. This COVID time also invites us to recenter our parishes in what matters most deeply. In valuing the most vulnerable in our society, people with disabilities, people of color, people with low income. Our churches will help hold up this alternative vision as we bring different lenses and skills for adaptation. Like for some, this time worshiping online has been more accessible, and for others, it has been a loss of community. In my own church, I have met many people who can't join the online worship. People without economic means, those for whom language is a barrier, people without younger people in their life to help them with technology. And I have met new people, members at a distance, some who were housebound but can be online. It's clear to me while some politicians are calling for the need to go back to normal, this disruption is actually an opportunity for rethinking and reimagining. So we don't have a lot of time for reimagining right now, but now and in the future, I want us to think about whose voices we are putting at the center of our decisions in church and in society. What are some alternative visions we have had glimmers of because of COVID? And going back to Isaiah, how do we find delight in all God's people? And what does God take delight in? What about us does God take delight in? I'm conscious about time, so we're not going to go in breakout room, but if Peter was up sharing the PowerPoint, and we can all see each other. And you can either type if that's easier, but you can also unmute in the last 5 minutes or so to share your voice in the circle. And Peter has posted the questions for us today.
I'll just read aloud what some people are putting in the chat. Wendy writes, my church has the option to attend via Zoom, in person inside the church, as well as a quick service at the exterior parking lot with masks on. So I think it addresses the importance of face-to-face as well as keeping safe. And if other folks want to address the questions through the chat, you're very welcome to do that. And I can read for the benefit of others, or as Miriam said, you can unmute your mic as a special treat.
I think it's important to realize in COVID times, but also in regular times, how intrinsically important it is that we delight in God, the aspect of love and showing grace to everyone, this and respect. And this is, you know, so important to when we meet someone, to give them the the value of time, so that we're engaging right in that moment, and whatever chatter is going on in our heads, to absolutely diffuse that, and from a pastoral point of view, give them all of you at that time, and to really listen through God's grace and see what God is speaking to you through them.
Thank you, Vanessa. I see others have unmuted. Audrey, do you want to speak? You're a very quiet group. I hope your small group work okay today.
There's a point about seeking input from seniors and people marginalized in churches, so we're clear on their needs, their limitations, and working towards meeting those needs if we're not already doing so. And agreement, we definitely need to find delight in all of God's people. When I think about the idea of delight, it is delight that for me makes hope possible in the midst of challenges. If we delight in each other, then we are seeking joy and really expecting to give and receive joy. The most compelling alternative vision and glimmering, good term, for me is one of a church and people less tied to a physical building and a particular time, more broadly engaged with one another and the world, helped by technology, although Alan points out that technology has its own problems to solve.
Very true.
That's another workshop.
Yeah, just thinking about some of our services.
For more on technology can solve and cause your problems, please visit us at St. John's West Toronto Zoom every Sunday.
Or St. Stephen in the Fields.
Nessa points out there are new ways to engage and use the telephone as we once did.
Very much so, yes.
I was happening. I don't normally lead Sunday worship, but I happened to lead Sunday worship on the day that Zoom crashed all over North America, and it was I haven't attempted it again since, but it was when technology works, and when technology fails us, not much we can do.
Our online services have been wonderful, but I'm still concerned about, I feel our church generally doesn't seem to include the people who are really economically disadvantaged. Yeah. And certainly reaching out from a computer doesn't necessarily solve that problem, because a lot of people can't even afford to be on computers.
Exactly. So in my Google Doc, I've posted a recent article I've written for Sojourners that raises some of the same points you have raised. And for those economically disadvantaged in our community, I wonder about having them being the first back in the church. Is this an opportunity to practice Jesus message that the last we put to those who need that, whether it be elderly, whether it be people without those resources, can come and can worship with each other, and the rest of us can join on Zoom. That's one idea. I'm so grateful for all of you. And I've taken delight in you as God's people today. I want to thank Peter for hosting us and for all the work of technology behind the scenes, and for Ellen for your kind invitation to do this workshop, and for the commitment of the church for ensuring that bodies matter, especially those deemed disposable in some ways. Blessings on you all, on your lunch, and on your workshop this afternoon. Peter might have, or Ellen might have final comments.
Thank you everyone for coming. This has been a really wonderful workshop. Thank you, Miriam. Thank you, Peter, for excellent hosting and co-hosting and sharing and reading. And the level of conversation we've had has just blown me away. I'm so inspired for how we can reimagine church and how we can reimagine church for everyone. Thank you, Miriam, again for your leadership. And we'll be sure to look at some of those other articles as well. Blessings, and hope to see many of you this afternoon.